With no shortage of needs ahead of the 2025 NFL Draft, many Dolphins fans would love to see the team trade down. Here are some scenarios in which it might make sense and some potential trade partners that may be in the market.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Last week and a half, 2 weeks, we've been looking at deep diving prospects that are going to be available for the Dolphins at their picks at both number 13 overall and number 48 overall. Those are your kind of two marquee draft selections as things currently stand with the Dolphins and the 10 picks that they're scheduled to make in the draft, which is about 2 weeks away. So we're getting there. But obviously the Dolphins have methodically approached free agency in a way that's not spending big dollars or going out and giving out top of market contracts. And it's left a number of position rooms across the roster. They remain to be unsettled, or they remain unsettled. And that's kind of amped up the anxiety, it feels like, a little bit about the draft and the urgency of this draft and the need of this draft to be a home run hit. And as easy as it is now on April 8th to say, it's a talent farming exercise and not a grocery shopping list where you don't go drafting for a guard and a tackle and a safety and a corner in that order because you need those spots to be filled in your roster. You want to be able to just authentically pick talent. But one way in which you can organically put yourself in a position where the players that are the best players that are available to be more in line with your needs is to move up and down the board, right? And the Dolphins as a team that is coming out of a high cash spend window with, spending cash over cap and them getting that relationship a little bit closer to equal so that they can reset the books so that as they cycle into their next competitive window, regardless of who the GM is, who the head coach is, who the quarterback is, whatever changes come and go over the next 18 months or whatever your window of timeline looks like, they are cyclically now focused on young rookie contract allocation. And I think that's apparent based on how they approach free agency and the fact that they have draft capital. And last year they planned on strategizing their free agency window to allocate more draft capital in the form of compensatory picks, which paid off for them with Robert Hunt getting you a 3 and Christian Wilkins getting you a 4. So you have more draft capital to work with. But as you look at the needs at 13, needs versus pick 13, you got a safety might be the best player available. Dolphins need a safety. It's not their most urgent need. They need a guard. They definitely need defensive tackle help. Defensive tackles might not be the best player available or really in the conversation the best player available at 13, depending on how the board plays out. So even if you get a list, and I know when we stacked the board at 13 versed off my rankings for the Dolphins, I said you're going to have a swing at the bat on one of these players as like a second tier. Tier 1 is like top 10 overall grades. And then tier 2 is like your unequivocal first round grades. You're in a position to get appropriate value and at least get a swing of the bat at one of those players at minimum. But if quarterbacks go, if you see 3 quarterbacks go, and where it's not only Shedeur Sanders ends up going in the first 12 picks, but if a team really gets desperate and takes Jackson Dart, if teams draft for needs at other spots, what might end up happening is you may have a surplus of players that are on your short list for 13 that are still there, in which case you may want to move down and collect more value and feel like you're still playing the board. Or even if you trade away from all of those players, let's say the best available players based off my rankings that are on the board for you at 13 are Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State, Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle from Michigan, and Shamar Stewart, and Nikki Minwari. Let's say those 4 players are left. And let's say you have a good offer to move down further than 4 spots. There is a world in which it's worth the risk to move out of that, and it's getting a good enough value or the ROI on what pick that you get back later in the draft. If you're netting a big enough surplus value, it's worth maybe moving out of and risking, hey, we might get a late 1, early 2 grade player as the best available players for us to pick from, and it puts us kind of in a different tier of talent available instead of one of those first round grades. But if you get a 2-back to move down 10 spots, is that worth it, especially with the needs that you have? And there's a whole trade value chart that teams use, and there's been a billion different iterations of it. But to put things into context, the first overall pick, if you're using the traditional Jimmy Johnson trade value chart, and as a Dolphins podcast, of course, we're going to use the Jimmy Johnson model. We're not going to use the Rich Hill, Bill Belichick variation, or the Harvard Law variation, or the Spielberger Fitzgerald variation. We're going to use the Jimmy Johnson traditional, like for 30 years now, this was like the original valuation of draft picks. The first overall pick is worth 3,000 points in this chart. To put that into context, the Dolphins pick at 13 is worth 1,150 points on this trade valuation economic value chart, which means you'd approximately need 3 of pick number 13 to offer a comparable package to offer the number 1 overall pick. Of course, this isn't always black and white, because some years you have a surplus of talent or you have a scarcity of talent, and it's going to make certain players at certain spots on the board, quarterback at number 1, might be even more valuable. Or if it's an elite tackle in a bad tackle class, you as a team that's selling a pick for a team to come up and trade for that player, you can theoretically ask for more. And I think what becomes interesting for Miami is they're at a spot in the draft where kind of the general perception of this class is Miami's within the window where they can get a safe, air quotes, safe pick. And they can move out of that window at a risk of maybe moving into the more high variance players a little later in the first round. But if you get enough back and you can charge because you're in the safe pick range, and depending on how the board falls, there may be needs motivations to move. And that's all of what we're going to be exploring the rest of the show. But I do think Miami is at a point where they're not, if they're trying to shop 13, or if they get offers to move down, they're not at a position in the draft where the pick is available at a discount, which makes it, with a team that has a lot of needs and would like to have more bites at the apple and would like to collect more day 2 draft capital and close this gap from 48 to 98, where you got 50 picks, you got to wait in between making selections, you can get some motivation to move down. And I think they are fortunate enough that maybe one of those perceived consensus top 10 players slides out a little bit. And again, that's kind of dependent on quarterbacks going. And if a team drafts an Ashton Genty, even though Genty is one of the best players available, but like a running back, if you get tight ends and running backs and quarterbacks, and that takes up a large chunk, and there's a couple of marquee players left, and none of them necessarily align with the primary needs that the Dolphins have, it might be the recipe for facilitation down the board. Now, you got to know who are the teams that might be looking to move up, right? It's very easy to say, well, we should trade down in the draft. Who's coming up? Why are they coming up? And what are you getting? There's some scenarios there we're going to be looking at the rest of the way here on this episode of Locked on Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy, whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet healthcare. Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable with over 100,000 products from all of your favorite brands. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet's needs met, from food to treats to toys to beds and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They have supplies for birds, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy makes it easy to manage your pet's health, from prescriptions, telehealth vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. Auto ship is a game changer. You could set up automatic deliveries for food, treats, or essentials so you never run out. You can easily change or cancel at any time. Our household has 3 pets north of 10, a dog and 2 cats. And one of our cats was recently diagnosed with cancer. We are actually using through our vet and fulfilling our prescription for the medication for her through Chewy, which is great. I mean, we pulled up, we had the consultation, we filled out the thing at the vet or at the consult, and 2 days later we pulled up from dropping the kids off at school, and the medication sitting right on our front step. It was very easy to access it, and it's made it very convenient and a lot less stressful in an unfortunate time. So Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the show description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions do apply. See site for complete details. So tankathon.com is kind of where it always has the NFL draft order and the NHL order and the NBA order in baseball, all the draft orders, right? And it's at tankathon.com. It's good to have a bad record because that's where your losing streak is reflected in green and your winning streak's reflected in red, because it's all about working to be as high up in the draft order as you possibly can. One of the other resources that they have is they have a draft power rankings, which looks at every team, the picks they're currently scheduled to make. And when you add all of those points up, what's the total draft assets you have at your disposal for this year's class? So right now, Cleveland, despite not picking number 1, currently has the highest value of talent available at their disposal, where they have picks 2, 3, 67, 94, 104. And they have a big gap to 179. So they effectively have 5 picks in the top 100. And they have 3 picks in the top 70. Then it's Jacksonville, who picks 5, but they have 2 3s. Then Tennessee, who has the number 1 overall pick, but they do not have a 3. The New England Patriots, 438, 69, 77, 106. San Francisco, but San Francisco is a unique one because they don't pick inside the top 10, but they have the 5th highest total draft power rankings. And they only have 2 picks inside the top 75, but they have 100, 113, 138, 147, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Miami currently sits 13th in the league on this list, which is a lot better feeling than 2 years ago, the last 2 and 3 years ago when they were dead last, when they had the fewest draft capital of any team in the league. But you look at some of these teams that are in front of Miami as far as how much draft capital they have, and these are the teams that I would typically associate with these teams have surplus value. The median team is Dallas at 12. And they actually have a reasonable amount of picks, but half their picks come after 200. But for example, you're not really going to get far in making negotiations with, say, Minnesota at 24, who has the least amount of draft capital of any team in the league, as far as them potentially coming up to your pick at 13 to be motivated for a player, because they only have 24, 97, 139, and 187. That's all the draft picks they have this year. Now, you can do business for future year picks, but how much of that do you really want to be the centerpiece of your move downs when you're trying to collect talent in the here and now? So I want to read the 12 teams that are out in front of Miami and then ask ourselves, what are some scenarios in which those teams might be willing to do business to come up the board, and where would they be coming from? Cleveland, Jacksonville, we mentioned, Tennessee, New England. Those 4 teams pick in the top 5 and then have obviously a next pick that's within the first 6 picks of the second round, where Cleveland has 33, which is the first pick of the round. Jacksonville has 36. Tennessee has 35, and New England has 38. Probably unlikely that you're, as the Dolphins, going to do business with New England and help boost them back up the board and get them with another top 15 pick, even if it means you're getting 38 and then maybe a future one and some additional day 2 draft capital as a result. I mean, that's a big drop, 25 spots. So probably not there. But then you have the Giants, who have 2 threes plus 34. You have Seattle, who has 18 and actually picks behind you, which is an interesting note, and then has 52 and 50, courtesy of the DK Metcalf trade. They also have 82 and 92. So Seattle is the first team that sits behind you that has surplus value. They have 2 picks in round 2, and they have 2 picks in round 3. Put a little star next to that one. The Saints, picking at 9, also have 40, 71, and 93, courtesy of the Marshawn Lattimore deal. The Raiders pick 6, 37, 68. The Jets, you're probably not going to do business with, and the Bills you're not going to do business with. So out of the teams that are picking directly in front of you, the only team that's picking, or the teams that sit in front of you in the draft power rankings for how much draft capital they have, there's only one team that's picking behind you that's not in the AFC East. That's Seattle, picking at 18. So that might be the kind of scenario where you sit down and you say, we have 4 players that are on the board that still meet this highest threshold of evaluation we have for available players. If we move back to 18 and we know one of these teams is not going to take one of the 4 players that we have on our short list, we can potentially move down and still be guaranteed to get a player in this kind of range. So this, for me, would kind of be do you move down from 13 to 18 if Seattle were to be motivated to go up and get an offensive lineman or whatever the motivation may be? A wide receiver, perhaps. And then maybe you pick Nicky Manwari, for example, as one of the lower graded players in that marquee tier of 13 players that I would have on my short list for the Dolphins. You get past where Miami picks, and then you get teams like Baltimore and the Chargers and the Cardinals and the Packers, the Rams. The Rams are an interesting one because they've kind of been rumored to be in the quarterback market, and they also, last year, were in the Brock Bowers market trying to move up. Here's the challenge for the Dolphins in this hypothetical. Say Tyler Warren goes 7 to the Jets, and the Colts, it's reported, are going to take Colston Loveland, and the Rams really want that flex tight end player that they didn't get in Brock Bowers last year, and they pick up the phone and they call the Dolphins, and they want to move up to 13. Now, the Dolphins are going down and would be going down in this scenario to 26, but the Rams don't have a 2. They have 90, they have 101, and 127, but they go from 26 to 90 is their next pick. So that's a team that I think is a more realistic trade up option than a lot of the names that are out there, but they're missing the second round pick sweetener that I think would make them an attractive team to trade with. But that is a team based on a scenario of what they were interested in last year with Bowers. I could see them potentially having a vision, and they've, again, been reported as a potential quarterback team. But we have not mentioned Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's in the same boat, but they're 5 spots closer to where the Dolphins are currently picking. Pittsburgh picks at 21. They gave up their 2 for DK Metcalf, so their next pick is at 83. They arguably have even less attractive talent because at least the Rams have 2 threes. Pittsburgh's got 21, 83, and then 123 is their next best pick. Pittsburgh potentially would be moving up for if a QB2 falls to that point in the draft and Miami's maybe kind of teased they're open enough to be in the market where a team would feel they would have a necessity to move up or else that player might be off the board. And that, of course, would be a dream come true type of scenario because if a team's trading up for a quarterback into your spot, you can kind of what we talked about as like the dynamic value of draft picks on the trade value chart. if you're coming up for a quarterback, you're automatically charging a premium. Not saying it's going to happen. But that's part of the challenges. I look at the teams that are kind of in the 20s, like say you wanted to move down and target a Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle from Oregon. You felt maybe you can move down into the 20s and secure his services there. You're looking for a big enough haul in return to warrant and justify the move down. But I think two of the more attractive options to move down with, they don't have a 2. So who are some teams that can give you worthwhile hauls to move around the board? And how big of a drop are you potentially looking at in talent to get that done? We're exploring that the rest of the way here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, you can join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet and get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love betting on FanDuel because it makes the experience easy, whether you're rooting for the Heat in a playoff game, the play-in Heat, or you're diving into player props from three-pointers to steals and assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com. Claim your $250 in bonus bets today with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So this is the unfortunate reality of trying to piece together hypothetical trade partners is it's not just team that has motivation, but team that has motivation and team that has right combination of assets to get you excited. I do think a team that might be of somewhat interest would be the Denver Broncos. They're another team. As I look at the Colts, right? And the Colts have been a popular tight end mock destination where if it's either getting in front of the Colts for Tyler Warren, or if Tyler Warren's gone and Colston Loveland's your target, or if Colston Loveland's gone for some reason and Tyler Warren's your target, that's a position area where I think you have the right mix of like an offensive weapon with a team that's been tied to the position that could make some sense for a team to come up. And Denver, they signed Evan Ingram, but that's a short-term fix for Sean Payton to come in there with Bo Nix, and they want to add more diversity to their skill group to help a young quarterback. They have 20, 51, and 85. Okay, so you've got a reasonable one pick in each of the first 3 rounds, and it's not a massive drop that knocks the Dolphins down 20 spots in the order like what would happen if they were trading with the Cleveland Browns to go out of the first round altogether. Now, if Cleveland wants to do that deal, say Cleveland takes Travis Hunter at 2, and hypothetically Shadur Sanders is on the board at 13, and Cleveland says, hey, you know what? It's gone on long enough. This is a team that has some incentive to move down. They have a lot of needs to pick. Let's go have our cake and eat it too after taking Travis Hunter and pick Shadur Sanders here, and we'll come back up from 33 and get a quarterback on a rookie contract to help us get out of the Deshaun Watson fiasco. I'd be all ears for that one, because not only are you're moving down 20 spots, you're moving down the first round altogether, which should net you an attractive haul. You're charging for a quarterback, and you're tethering your potential future picks, because you can't go from 13 to 33 and not get a first round pick next year. You're tying yourself and your future draft capital to the Browns, who finished with the second worst record in football last year, which is not a bad extra incentive to do a deal, right? But let's keep it on Denver. The difference between Miami's pick at 13 and Denver's pick at 20 is 300 points on the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart. And again, this exact hypothetical would be Evan Ingram's a short-term fix for us. We want a mismatch player at the tight end position to kind of help Sean Payton's offense have an extra layer to it. We want to, maybe Tyler Warren can do some of the Taysom Hilly type gadget stuff. They have a big time vision for a player, right? Miami could go to 20, and if they were to collect pick number 51 in return, that's worth 390 points. So Miami would end up netting plus 90 points, which is the equivalence from a point value perspective of about an extra third round pick in assets by collecting a late second round and moving down in the first round. So you lose value with your first round pick, but by putting this extra, having an additional second round pick that's between 48 and 51, your total value is equal to an added third round pick in value in the draft. That might still put you in the stratosphere to draft a Nick Eamon-Warry or a Kenneth Grant. That can leave you potentially in a position to, hey, you move down, you got the surplus value. Now does that put offensive line in play? If Gray Zabel's there from North Dakota State, that's a part of that conversation with a pick that still remains in that top 20 range. I think anything that moves down shorter than that, say Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron are still available, and Arizona wants to come up and get in front of Atlanta, and the Dolphins get the phone call, and Arizona wants to come up 2 spots, and Miami thinks they can get the other one of those 2 players by moving down 4 spots. The difference in those 2 picks is about 150 points. That's the equivalence of a late third round pick. So if Arizona ended up calling and wanting to get up in front of both Atlanta and Indianapolis, what you're probably asking for in return would be pick 78, which is worth 200 points, and say, hey, we need to net a value here to have an incentive to move down. We're selling the pick. You have to give us surplus value to motivate us to move down. So you could potentially go from 13 to 16, with pick 78 being probably the asset that would be coming back. So those are staying inside the top 20. And if you go to the further reaches of that, you could probably charge a 2. Maybe you have to give a day 3 pick back. But if you're going to do like the incremental one, you're probably going to get a pick that splits the difference between your pick at 48 and your pick at 98. What gets really interesting is that kind of Cleveland type scenario. And of course, these are all long shot odds to happen. More often than not, far more teams are motivated to move down than teams actually get the chance to do so. But let's explore that scenario. And even if it's Shedeur Sanders is gone, say it's Jackson Dart, and Pittsburgh is looking at potentially moving up, and the Rams are potentially looking at Jackson Dart if he makes it to 26. And a team like Cleveland knows, or a team like the Giants knows, if they pass on Shedeur, say, New Orleans takes Shedeur at 9. Say it's Cam Ward at 1, Shedeur Sanders goes 9, Jackson Dart's on the board, and expectation is either the Steelers or the Rams in the early 20s are going to get him. And there's some teams that are facilitating and handling phone calls, and a team like Cleveland or a team like the Giants, who passed on the first time around, kind of knows you're on the clock. As far as, if you wait, these other teams that are picking in front of you is going to land this player. Let's use Cleveland as the example, because they pick at 33, and they're the team that would be making the first decision to pass. They have 33, 67, and 94. I'm not a math guy, but it's 20 spots order, and I have a calculator, and I have a chart that tells me how much all these picks are worth. So Miami's pick is worth $11.50. 33 is worth $5.80. 67 is worth $2.55, and then 94 is worth $1.24. That still leaves the Browns minus 2, effectively 200 points in the red, as far as the pick that they're asking for is still worth 200 points more than 33, 67, and 94 are combined. So that's where a future pick and potentially a future first-round pick being a part of the equation and calculus, because you're charging a surplus for a team that picks top 15 to get out of the first round altogether, for a team to come up all the way up to 13. That's where I think your biggest trade opportunity lies, but you'd have to get a sweetheart deal to justify it. I don't know that the Browns, with their salary cap situation, are the team that's best suited to do this, because they need the rookie picks to restock the pond and help them get out of contracts. Because as bad as Miami's cash over cap's been the last 2 seasons, they've been top 8 in the league. I think they were top 5 last year as far as cash spend. Cleveland's been top 3 like the last 4 years running. They are spending cash at a crazy rate. So they need to restock the pond, which puts the Giants as the other team that is of interest to me, because you've got Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. Those guys are hot seat guys, right? Like there's much more urgency, where Jimmy Haslam for the Browns came out and said, well, it's me and my wife Dee's fault that we went for Deshaun Watson, so hold it against us. Don't hold it against the guys running the team. That kind of feels like the owner falling on the sword for facilitating a move, where Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, they signed Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, and there's an implicit understanding that we got to win now or we are going to lose our jobs. And they spent a lot of money in free agency. There's an aggressiveness and an urgency there. And they also have 2 threes, and they have a pick that's 1 behind the Browns at 33. So if Brian Daboll and Joe Shane feel the pressure to win, and they want to have that extra sweetener of, look, we just invested in a quarterback of the future to get this done with, you could go to 34, which is worth $560. You could get potentially 65, which is worth $265. You could get 99, which is worth $104. Those 3 picks combined are still 250 points short of just the value of Miami's pick at 13. So if you told me the Giants were willing to give you 34, 65, 99, and like a next year 1 to come all the way up for a quarterback, so that they could have a quarterback if they took Abdul Carter at 3 or they took Travis Hunter at 3, it's a big brain scenario, right? But that's how the math would work. And if you got an offer like that, and now all of a sudden you pick 30, you'd be picking, if that scenario were to manifest itself, you'd pick at 34, 48, 65, 98, 99, 116, 135, 150, 150. All of a sudden you're looking at a pool of draft picks in the first 5 rounds that you not only can address your needs, but your intersection of value for addressing those needs is probably going to put you in a much better place to draft with a shopping list instead of just drafting and taking best players. And then, oh, by the way, you have 2 first-round picks next year, for regardless of how the season works itself out. All kinds of scenarios. This is the kind of big brain stuff that I think a lot of fans like about the draft window. I try not to go too far down the Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the cork board and the pictures and going crazy, pointing from here to there. I don't go too far down that rabbit hole, but we just did it here. Hope you guys enjoyed. It's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll be back again soon for more Miami Dolphins 2025 draft prep.